Good morning, afternoon or evening everybody. Welcome back to part 5 of this scale model build series, Panther 44. Last time out was a rather large chipping session. You can catch that and all previous episodes using the link above. This time out we are going to paint the details of the tank, add mud effects to the lower hull section and paint the wheels ready for final fitment. So, without further ado, let's get cracking. We start the detailing with some gunmetal grey. I am using paint from Vallejo for this, mixed with a dash of water. The first point of call is the tow cables. These would have a slight shine under the rust and dirt, of which I will add in the next video. It's just a case of carefully painting the cable with a fine brush, giving the cable a good coat. Extra care is taken around the ends, ensuring we don't ruin all our hard work on the chipping. I started to paint the other cable that is wrapped on the rear deck, but then decided to paint the tarpaulin first. For this I am using this German yellow, again from Vallejo, mixed with some tap water. Vallejo paints are my go-to for any handwork. I find these mixed with water go down with a brush really well. They leave very little stroke marks and stay a good consistency for a decent amount of time. I paint the tarp with several light coats, trying to keep some of the shading intact. Any shading that is lost, I will use oil paints to regain that shadow. Again, in the next video. It took a fair amount of time to paint accurately, avoiding the paintwork on the tank. The last thing we want to do at this stage is get yellow paint on our camouflage scheme and risk having to touch bits up. The key is to chill down and take your time with these things. Whilst it looks like I'm painting quickly, I have sped this up by 2 times. Here is the real pace, slow as a snail. Once the first coat is laid, I go over all the large upper surfaces with a second coat. This highlights these areas some more and gives them a bolder finish. When the tarpaulin is finished, I go back to the gunmetal grey to finish the tow cables. Same thing here, just carefully painting with a fine brush and avoiding any painted surfaces. The brushes I'm using are a chipping set by enamel. They are not bad so long as you keep them clean. If you have any preference of brushes for tasks like these, please let me know in the comments. I am always looking to expand my inventory. With the tarpaulin and cables done, I move on to some of the tools. I start by adding some medium grey to the gunmetal solution to take away some of that shine. I start with the shovel, putting an even coat over the metal end. I then work my way around the tank, painting all the metal components of the tools in this gunmetal greyish solution. When I'm finished with the tools, I go back to using pure gunmetal grey for the front-mounted machine gun and the turret-mounted machine gun. I focus on the metal areas of this, leaving the handles to be painted brown later on. Next, I add some German grey to the solution to darken the paint down. I use this just to add some different tones to flat metal areas on the tools. This will help add variation to the rust tones later down the line. I also paint the fire extinguisher in this finish. Don't know why, but in my head, it's a darker, flatter color than the tools. The final color is the wooden elements. For this, I am using this German camouflage brown with a dash of tap water. No real reason why, I just think the tone will work well for the tool handles. I then paint all the handles in this dark brown finish, as before, just being extra careful not to get any paint on any of the pre-painted surfaces and fixings. For the ammo box on the rear deck, I started with this finish but decided I wanted something a bit lighter, a softwood finish of sorts. So I add some German yellow to the mixture to give it a lighter finish. I paint the ammo box, trying to paint in the direction of the grain as much as possible. This will give any light stroke marks a grain-like pattern. Final thing to do is add more German yellow to the solution and paint the handles. With all the tools and details on the hull complete, it's time to paint the wheels. For this, I use a black and blue mixture to give me a rubber black. By adding blue, it gives the black an oily, rubbery color. This also works on weathering to get oil stains. This is a fairly simple yet time-consuming procedure, carefully painting the rubber tire on every wheel. I always paint the inside face first. This is so I can rest it on the desk face down without wrecking the front surface. When the rear side is painted, I move to the front. Extra care is taken here, as most of the tire surfaces will be visible by the front. The final part is just filling in the gap on the top face of the tire. The outer and inner wheels are next, again starting on the inside. I know this is fairly pointless as it can barely be seen, but I like to do it anyway just in case. On the Panther model, I find these wheel sets easier to paint. Thanks to the higher rim, you can run the brush right up to this surface. The process is repeated on all the wheels until every single one is complete. Before we can fit the wheels for the final time, I need to add the mud effects to the hull whilst I have easy access. To do this, I am using mud paste and an array of pigment powders. I start by mixing some Mr. Weathering paste with some enamel thinner to create a thin sludge solution. I am not aiming for a super muddy tank this time out, so a thin solution will be perfect to add a thin layer of dirt and grime to the lower hull. Using a wide brush, I start coating the areas I want the most dirty in the solution. Nothing too accurate here, just ensuring I am keeping the mud effects to the lower hull area at this stage. To spread and blend the dirt out further, I decant some white spirit, soak the brush, and start to spread the mud effect around, ensuring it gets in all the nooks and crannies. Once I have coated all the areas I want to be muddy and dusty, I use a hairdryer to speed up the drying process. The color will completely change when doing this and will give us a better idea of the mud finish. At this point, I realized I forgot to paint the track guide wheel tire, so I quickly paint this now in the rubber black solution. Any areas that I have missed with the mud, I soak the brush in the white spirit, blend it in, and dry with the hairdryer. Next, it's time to add some variation to the dusty, muddy finish with some pigments. First thing I do is mix some of this European earth with white spirit to create a wash. Then, I start adding it to the hull, trying to be as random as I can with the areas I am applying it to. Next, I whip out the hairdryer again until we can see the new pigment color over the base mud. Using a dry brush, I blend the pigment to make it look more natural. It's key here not to wait too long to do this part of the process, otherwise it gets very hard to blend. The process is then repeated until I am happy with the result, adding smaller amounts and adding streaks to the mud. Different pigment washes can also be used at this point, depending on how much variation you want. When I am fairly happy with the result, I add some further variation with some light dust. I apply this dry to the hull, focusing on areas that would get a build-up of dust and dirt. And that's it. Like I said, I wasn't going for a heavy, muddy look, just a light, dusty effect, so the lower hull doesn't look clean. Now I can apply the wheels for the final time. These take a little bit of jiggery-pokery to get them all to sit in place. Once all in place, I start fixing them with the extra thin cement. This will hold the wheels in place permanently. With the details painted, mud added, and the wheels fitted, that is where I'm going to leave this video. If you have found it helpful or vaguely entertaining, please do hit those like and subscribe buttons and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next time out, we are going to get this thing finished. We will be painting the tracks, adding rust enamels, and adding weathering effects using oil paints. But for now, farewell and happy modeling, everybody.